Hello everyone, it's DJ here. I'm recording from my remote lair, a little different from the normal background, just like last week at Fort Knox. Well, I didn't record early like I said I would, so now I'm doing my recording a little bit early, but still hoping to get things out on time otherwise. So this week I'm going to talk about the temporary and permanent disability retirement lists. I'll, as always, try to keep it simple and give you an idea of what to expect if you end up on one of these lists. So you've finally made it through all the medical board rigmarole, the eternal journey, as some of us call it, and now you're about to be medically retired. You have a rating from your branch of service, and now you're wondering what in the world is going to happen next, right? Well, here's what you can expect. Well, first of all, let's define a few things. So what are these retirement lists? The temporary and permanent disability retirement lists are essentially active duty retirements, regardless of whether you're reserve or active duty or whatever. You've been determined to have a service-connected disability. It's not something that's going to be resolved quickly, and it directly impacts your ability to perform your military duties. So, you are going to be medically retired. And as always, I said, you need to have a disability rating above a certain percentage, 30% or higher. If you need more detail on how medical boards work, please look at my last video called Beware the Ides of Medical Boards, ? I'll include a link in the description. Excuse me. So, how do you become eligible for one of these lists? Basically, you have a long-term injury, you have a combined disability rating from your branch of service, not the VA, of at least 30%, and you're going to be placed on one of these lists. If your disability is expected to be something from which you can recover in the next year, 2, 3, then you'll be placed on the temporary disability retirement list, or TDRL. If you are expected to have long-term unrecoverable injuries, then you will be placed on the permanent disability retirement list, or PDRL. Let me tell you a little bit more about the differences between those. On the temporary retirement list, you will only be on that list for a maximum of 3 years. Pardon me while I look at my notes here and there. You'll only be on the list for a maximum of 3 years. And you'll be reevaluated at least every 18 months. Probably more, but expect at least every 18 months. If you have been found by those reevaluations to have recovered to the point that you can perform your military duties again, then you'll be returned to active duty service or reserve service, whichever is the case. If you are found to not have recovered sufficiently, which is more often the case from what I've seen, then you will be transferred to the permanent disability retirement list, or in some cases, as I described last week, in some cases offered a severance package and separated from the military entirely. When you're on the temporary list, you have a minimum of, well, I'll get to that with the pay part, but expect when reevaluated that it is possible for ratings to go down, not always up. So what are the benefits of these lists? Well, like I said, they're essentially active duty retirement. So you've got pay and benefits packages starting right away without having to wait until age 60. So keep in mind that eligibility for this is your combined disability rating from your branch of service. Again, as I've said over and over, not from the VA. So when you are put on the temporary retirement list, your minimum rate of retirement pay is 50% of your active duty base pay, and it can go up to 75% as a maximum. The The formula for determining retirement pay when you're on one of these lists is just your base pay multiplied by your disability rating. So if you have a 60% branch of service disability rating, then your retired pay is your active duty base pay times 60%, up to a maximum of 75, like I just said. So even if your disability rating is higher, let's say 80%, your pay will be 75%. And as I said a moment ago, if you are on the temporary disability retirement list and a reevaluation shows that you are recovering or that your final disability rating is going to be less than 30%, you can be removed from that list and offered a severance. And if your permanent disability rating is still 30% or higher, then you can be transferred to the permanent list. Again, those reevaluations can cause your rating to go down, not always up. So always keep that in the back of your mind. And very often, a benefit that is not considered when being placed on these retirement lists is the benefit of Tricare health care. This is something that I believe is just as important or more than the money. In fact, I'd say a little more. I very often tell people that this is easily worth another $1,000 per month. So just so they have an idea of the true value of this benefit. This is something that most people have to pay, especially right now, have to pay a heck of a lot of money to get, especially at the level of care that they can receive from Tricare. So this is incredibly valuable and should not be disregarded when being placed in a retirement status. So what do you need to do in order to make sure you have Tricare coverage when you're on these lists? It's very simple. You and your family, your spouse and your children, are eligible for coverage. You need to make sure you have the right ID cards and the right status in the Defense Eligibility, let's see, I always forget what it's called, the Defense Enrollment Eligibility Reporting System. I always think of it by its acronym. So DEERS is the acronym. You need to make sure your family members are enrolled in DEERS and that the DEERS operator has you, as the sponsor, listed as being retired, not a reserve retiree. There is a difference. So when you're in this retired status, you need to make sure that you, as the sponsor, have a blue ID card and that your dependents, your spouse and your children, have a tan ID card. Now, children under 10 don't need ID cards. Just make sure they're registered so that they can still take advantage of Tricare and some of the other goodies out there. But at least for the spouse, children over 10, make sure they have ID cards, the right type, and all of these cards on the back under the medical section should say yes for direct and civilian care. If they don't say that, get your status amended in the DEERS database and get new cards issued. Also, when you go to the DEERS operator to get those new cards, make sure to take a copy of your disability orders with you. I'm not talking about the ones from your branch of service. I mean the one that actually lists your disability rating on it. It'll look quite different from the discharge order you get from your branch of service. It's pretty obvious. In fact, I will post an example of a disability order on my website for you to see, at least from the Army perspective, how they look. So, I've mentioned pay this whole time. What do you need to do in order to get paid? And this is primarily for the retirement services officers out there, for those who might not already know. In fact, for you service members out there, I recommend that you get the help of an RSO rather than trying to do this yourself. The application can look simple, but there are lots of little areas there where mistakes can be made, and those mistakes can delay significantly when your pay and benefits start. So in order to make things done right, I would recommend going through an RSO, someone who's trained in this, and get it resolved properly. So I'm going to talk about some boring stuff for a moment, forms and all that lovely jazz. Bear with me, it won't take long. So when you're applying for retired pay, you use DD Form 2656. Other than a few supporting documents, there's really nothing else that needs to be completed. There are other forms in the typical retired pay packet, but they are really quite redundant in this case, and they're not necessary. When the application packet is sent to the Defense Finance and Accounting Service, or DFAS, DFAS doesn't even look at things like a DD Form 108 or SF 1199. They're just redundant. So they're not even necessary in this case. The supporting documents that you need to send if you're on the PDRL or the TDRL are simply the disability order and your final retirement point statement. Make sure that that retirement point statement includes all the way up to the date you were discharged. You might need to contact your branch of service, or if you're National Guard, your state level retirement points manager to get this done. It's quite simple, so don't let people make you think that it's complicated. So, you've got the disability order and the retirement point statement and the DD 2656. For most people, that's all you really need. And that goes directly to Defense Finance and Accounting Service, or DFAS. Expect there to be about a 2-month delay from the effective date of your disability order until you start getting paid. But don't worry, you're not going to lose any money. You'll get back pay for that entire time. Now, what if you are one of those others? I've mentioned most people, but what's that other group I'm talking about? Well, the other group is those people who have 20 or more years of qualifying service. So you have a 20-year letter. If you have a 20-year letter, same standard I just mentioned, you just add a few supporting documents to go with it. Those documents are your 20-year letter and your reserve component survivor benefit election. So, pretty simple. Not a whole lot of complex stuff there. So, and those are for concurrent receipt later on. In fact, I'll give a brief example of what that is, but I'll go deeper into those topics in the coming weeks. Moving on. So, I've mentioned in previous episodes how military pay and VA compensation interact. Typically, whatever you get from the military is offset dollar for dollar by what you receive from the Veterans Administration. The same applies here. However, there is a law in place that is typically called, for simplicity, concurrent receipt, but is actually called Concurrent Retirement and Disability Pay, or CRDT. This is simply a change in the law that allows for people with a length of service retirement, meaning 20 or more years of qualifying service, and they have a 50% or higher VA rating. Now, these people are allowed to receive VA compensation and retirement pay without any offset. Now, this causes some confusion with people on on medical retirements, because they think this should apply to them. Well, there is an exception in that law for medical retirement. But if you have that 20-year letter and you are at the age that you are eligible for your reserve retirement, then concurrent receipt can kick in. You might be eligible for this other type of pay that I'm going to mention as well, or rather instead, but we don't know. That's a separate hurdle to jump. All right, so this other type of pay that I've mentioned is called combat-related special compensation. There's a lot of confusion over this, and probably because they both have CR in their acronym. You've got CRDP for concurrent receipt and CRSC for combat-related special compensation. They have totally different rules, but even RSOs and Physical Evaluation Board Liaison Officers, or PEBLOs, tend to get these mixed up in their heads. And, I've been doing this long enough that I understand how newbies can have this confusion, and it just takes some education to overcome it. So, here's the short version on CRSC, and week after next, after I do a CRDP episode, the week after next, I'll go deeper into CRSC and how that particular animal works for you. So, CRSC, in short, is a separate type of compensation that makes up for some or all of the VA offset that I just mentioned. Let's just say that you've got $1,000 in military retirement and you're having $800 of that offset by the VA because you're getting $800 from the VA. So you're really only getting $200 from the military. CRSC could make up for part of that, or in some cases, all of it. Now, this is not an automatic thing. This is something for which you have to apply as a totally separate application procedure than going through the medical boards or applying for military retirement. In fact, both of those have to have already happened before you can apply for CRSC. So really, that's the first two steps. Have a military retirement and have it being offset by VA compensation. Once those are happening and you have at least a 10% VA rating, you can apply for CRSC. If it's approved, then you'll have some or all of your VA offset knocked off and get a third paycheck every month. So I know one person who is receiving military retirement, VA compensation, and, actually I know more than one person, and combat-related special compensation all at the same time. Now, how all those numbers work, I'm not going to describe right now. I'll go into that in a separate video. But just know that it is out there. So that's quite a bit of information for 1 week. What's supposed to be simple might seem complicated, but if it does seem confusing, please play this video again. I think you'll see that it's really been described quite simply and understandably. But if not, if there are any questions, then please leave comments in the comment section below. If you think this particular video or audio, if you're listening to the podcast, is useful for other people, then please share this with them. Forward the links to them so they can take in the same information. If you like this project and would like to see it grow, then on YouTube, please hit those like and subscribe buttons. On the podcast, be sure to hit subscribe. And for all of these, please send comments, write reviews, do whatever you can, whatever you're willing to do to help this project grow and get more of this education out there for people who need it. As always, I thank you for being part of this audience and for joining me this week. Have a great Thanksgiving week, and of course, thank you for your service.